Bene. Rileggo quindi il testo in questo momento la registrazione è stata attivata. Rileggo il testo della disclaimer. Vi informiamo che la riunione odierna sarà videoregistrata e che pertanto coloro che non vogliono concedere la liberatoria all'utilizzo della propria immagine debbono staccare la telecamera. La registrazione verrà conservata nella intranet aziendale per essere poi cancellata entro un termine massimo di 30 giorni. Ma si potrà inoltre condividere con coloro sempre interno all'organizzazione che ne faranno esplicita richiesta. Bene, dunque grazie. Io allora in questo momento, a questo punto introduco, passo la parola al dirigente dell'Ufficio Beni di Consumo, dottor Matteo Masini. Grazie Matteo. So se già era in linea prima.
Sì,
Vediamo.
sì, sono in linea, ci sono.
Grazie Matteo.
Buongiorno.
La parola a te.
Buongiorno a tutti, grazie Giuseppe, benvenuti a tutti i partecipanti dalla nostra rete, dai nostri partner associativi, dalle imprese che sono presenti oggi. Io vi do soltanto un brevissimo saluto e un benvenuto a questo evento, vi ringrazio per il tempo e per l'attenzione che dedicate all'iniziativa. Questa è la presentazione in realtà dei risultati di un progetto che è stato avviato già da un certo tempo in collaborazione principalmente con il nostro partner Federografi e nasce dalla esigenza di ampliare gli orizzonti della nostra attività e di identificare le opportunità sia per quello che riguarda i rapporti commerciali, sia per quello che riguarda la filiera complessiva dell'oreficeria e della gioielleria, anche in funzione del fatto che, come probabilmente molti di voi già sanno, l'Agenzia ICE ha ampliato nel corso degli ultimi 2 anni la propria rete nel continente africano, con l'apertura di nuovi uffici in Senegal, in Nigeria, chiedo scusa, in Kenya e con l'apertura di una rete di punti di corrispondenza e di cosiddetti osservatori economici che ci consentiranno appunto di avere una presenza più ramificata, più capillare, più reattiva e ricettiva, sia rispetto alle esigenze, alle caratteristiche, allo sviluppo, alle dinamiche dei mercati locali, sia rispetto a quelle che sono le esigenze e le attività delle nostre imprese su questo continente. Grazie a questa rete, grazie a questo al lavoro dei colleghi degli uffici di rete, che ringrazio nuovamente e che saranno poi successivamente interverranno successivamente in questa presentazione, abbiamo la possibilità di condividere dei risultati che sicuramente saranno di interesse e che altrettanto sicuramente non saranno ovviamente considerati un punto di arrivo della nostra attività, quanto piuttosto un punto di partenza per ulteriormente approfondire, ulteriormente consolidare il lavoro che facciamo per le nostre imprese su questi mercati. Da parte mia, ripeto, non anticipo nulla, non do informazioni sui dati che saranno ampiamente illustrati dai colleghi che seguiranno, anche se devo dire che per quello che ho visto ci sono numerosi spunti e numerose opportunità che emergono da queste indagini. Ovviamente le presentiamo oggi, le potremo condividere successivamente, ci saranno occasioni di approfondire singoli aspetti nelle prossime iniziative dedicate al settore, a partire già tra poco, a gennaio del prossimo anno, con la prossima edizione di Vicenza Oro. E da parte nostra, sia qui a Roma sia nella rete, restiamo ovviamente disponibili a collaborare, a dare tutta l'assistenza possibile per approfondire, mettere a frutto, utilizzare e sviluppare ulteriormente questi spunti. Io mi fermerei qui, ringraziando di nuovo sia i colleghi sia i partner che hanno reso possibile questa iniziativa e che oggi la presentano, e le imprese che dedicano il loro tempo e che danno la loro attenzione in questa giornata, in questo pomeriggio di connessione online. Ritornerei a questo punto la parola al collega Giuseppe Oliva, che modererà l'incontro. Io purtroppo non potrò essere presente per l'intero incontro, ma insomma, ho già avuto modo un po' di vedere la cosa e le indagini, e mi riservo poi di approfondirle successivamente. Auguro a tutti una utile prosecuzione, un'utile partecipazione a questo evento. Grazie ancora di nuovo a tutti, buongiorno.
Matteo, grazie. E quindi passerei la parola al dottor Luigi Marossi, che è il vicepresidente di Confindustria Federografi con delega all'internazionalizzazione. Grazie Luigi. Andiamo un po'. Andiamo. Luigi. Luigi. Luigi.
Giuseppe, lo vedo, ma il microfono chiuso.
No,
Vedo.
ecco. Microfono. Ok, un attimo di pazienza. C'è.
Buongiorno, ecco.
Buongiorno, grazie Luigi.
Ci sono.
Prego.
Buongiorno a tutti, saluto gli amici dell'ICE e ovviamente tutti i colleghi imprenditori oggi qui presenti. Porto i saluti della nostra Presidente Claudia Piserico, che purtroppo oggi non è potuta essere presente. Come ha già detto Matteo Masini, Confindustria Federale già da qualche anno ha ragionato con ICE su come avviare un'indagine o uno studio in questi paesi che comunque sono significativamente importanti. La potenzialità di assorbimento di gioielleria nel continente africano sono notevoli, ma la situazione economica, geopolitica che tutti sappiamo, le barriere tariffarie e non tariffarie, licenze, procedure e quant'altro, rendono comunque sicuramente il tutto l'approccio difficile e comunque non molto trasparente, visto che comunque tutto deve essere vincolato da determinati hub, tipo quello di Dubai, che tutti conosciamo. Allo stesso tempo un settore come il nostro, che comunque esporta il 91% di quanto produciamo, non può non preoccuparsi di trovare degli sbocchi e promuoversi su mercati ancora poco conosciuti come quello africano. Quindi per questo lo studio, che sicuramente, come diceva Matteo Masini, ci darà sicuramente delle informazioni utili, che ovviamente non conosco ancora e sono curioso appunto di sentire, ma saranno solamente un punto di partenza, tanto è vero che sarà poi a noi capire se approfondire la cosa e magari ancora con l'aiuto degli uffici andare avanti con lo studio e capire meglio la cosa. Ancora un grazie a tutti gli uffici ICE coinvolti, e so che è stato fatto uno studio su 11 paesi, mi sembra di aver capito e non vorrei errare, che contano 500 milioni di persone, quindi insomma, sicuramente potenziali acquirenti. Quindi si tratta di un lavoro complesso, sicuramente certosino, ma come dicevano appunto sarà sicuramente l'inizio, spero sia appunto l'inizio e ci sia un proseguo anche da parte nostra delle curiosità e di poterne trarne spunti importanti. Quindi auguro un buon lavoro, ringrazio Matteo Masini, ovviamente i colleghi di Roma, Gioia, Giuseppe, e i responsabili dell'ufficio ICE coinvolti in questo importante progetto, che dovrebbe essere appunto gli uffici di Accra, Addis Abeba, Johannesburg e Ruanda. Grazie a tutti.
Grazie Luigi, grazie Vicepresidente. E a questo punto cominciamo con il primo slot di mercati, che è rappresentato da ICE Johannesburg e che verrà introdotto prima dal collega Giovanni Gianlucatena. Gianluca?
Buongiorno
Grazie.
a tutti, scusate, io sono in taxi, sto rientrando da una riunione che purtroppo programmata da tempo non si è riusciti a spostare, quindi sono anche in collegamento solo audio per ragioni di rete. Ringrazio per l'attenzione rivolta ai 3 paesi di responsabilità di ICE Johannesburg, cioè il Sudafrica, Zambia e Zimbabwe, 3 realtà apprezzabili come dimensioni di mercato, molto diverse fra loro e anche molto articolate al loro interno, realtà popolose ma con poteri di acquisto e di mercato che non sempre corrispondono alle dimensioni del paese. Questo perché, come avrete modo di conoscere, ci sono delle dinamiche commerciali peculiari per ciascuno dei 3 mercati. Le eventuali domande che le aziende dovessero volerci porre, vi preghiamo di farcele avere per email scrivendo a johannesburg@ice.it o tramite la sede. Le raccoglieremo cercando di costruire delle risposte articolate da farvi avere in gruppo. Questo perché vogliamo darvi uno strumento utile e non spot. abbiamo scelto di utilizzare i consulenti che hanno realizzato per noi le indagini per una loro esposizione, perché pensiamo che sia utile valorizzare non solo le professionalità che abbiamo impiegato per costruire questi importanti documenti, ma anche perché, conoscendo molto meglio di noi, che siamo limitatamente presenti sul territorio, soltanto a Johannesburg, darvi un insight approfondito può aiutare e guidare meglio le imprese che sono coinvolte ed interessate a questi mercati nel conoscere i facts and figure di questi 3 paesi e nello sviluppare le relative domande. Quindi io mi taccio ringraziando Sean, Alex e Michelle che nell'ordine presenteranno first South Africa, second Zimbabwe, third Zambia. I'm switching to English because they don't speak Italian. So please, thank you so much all the people joining us today. And I will start with the South African presentation. Thank you so much, and you're welcome to write and get in contact with our office as soon as you want, and we will try to help companies to make their own better business here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gianluca. Please, Mr. Henning, it's up to you now to start with your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction. I'm just moving into presentation mode. Is it coming up?
Probably shown it's your turn to start with the Zambia. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so the markets that we did, that we were requested to do, were South Africa and Zimbabwe. We didn't do Zambia. We weren't requested to do Zambia. The only 2 markets we were requested to look at was South Africa and Zimbabwe. I'm not sure about the Zambia request. We haven't received any detail or any requests about Zambia at all. So yeah, today I'll be presenting South Africa and then Zimbabwe for you. So just firstly starting from a South Africa's perspective and overall as an investment destination, looking at the economic performance of South Africa over the last few years. And you'll see there, if you start firstly with GDP, you'll see that South Africa's GDP has been fairly consistent. Obviously in 2020, there were a lot of challenges regarding the COVID time. And you'll see the economy was already fairly flat before COVID impact started in Q2. And then you'll see fairly flat growth even ahead into 2022, even into 2023. I think the forecast we're receiving from the IMF now for South Africa is about 1.5% growth from a GDP perspective.
Sorry, Sean, I've just interrupted. I don't think that your screen has changed. So it's not in presentation mode and it's still on the first slide.
Is that better?
Right. Yeah, just go into full screen mode.
Does it move, Michelle?
It has moved to the next slides, but not in full presentation mode for now.
Okay, I don't know why it does. It's not shifting for some reason. It's all right then. What I'll do is that I'll just stay in this mode then, because yeah, I don't know, for some reason it's shifting on my side, but not on your side.
Okay. All good.
What you can see from an inflation perspective is that unfortunately inflation obviously moved quite high into 2022 as per the global trends that we saw with various supply issues and supply constraints. Inflation was affected in South Africa as well, and the exchange rate was also not very favorable during that time. You look at the US dollar, you look at the euro, you see the trend all the way through from 2020 through to 2022. Yeah, you'll see that there's been consistent weakening of the local currency. South Africa boasts, again from an economic perspective, South Africa boasts the most advanced broad-based economy in sub-Saharan Africa, a very, very well-developed market. The African government seeks to utilize laws and policies to encourage and in some cases mandate reform for historical economic imbalances that are entrenched in South Africa during the apartheid era in South Africa from the 60s to the early 90s. Africa was under apartheid era, and those issues are being addressed. This is conducted by broad-based Black economic empowerment called BBEEE enforcement in South Africa, triple E's, enforcement in South Africa and programs in South Africa, which aim to achieve proportional representation for the workplace from a racial, gender, and a disability group perspective. Also, tariffs are introduced on imported goods and encourage greater local industrialization in South Africa as well. In October 2020, there was the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan that was put together, and the goal was to replace 20% of imported goods across 42 countries to be shifted into local products and production within the next 5 years. So yeah, quite an aggressive move to move away from imports to more a local production perspective. Economic growth in South Africa has been largely stagnant since 2008, as mentioned previously there, and obviously from a forecast from IMF perspective, looking at 1.5% medium-term growth. More recently, there's been some positive developments from South Africa's perspective. So the 1.5% may be exceeded, but expectations are not excessively though, probably around maximum 2.5% growth, which obviously is better. We're all looking for positive growth, right? So growth at 2.5% growth will be great. Obstacles to growth in South Africa include lack of access to reliable power, policy uncertainty, lack of regulatory oversight, state-owned enterprise challenges that drain the fiscus in South Africa, widespread corruption, violent crime, etc., etc. South Africa has various challenges that we deal with, similar to obviously.
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Henning. Could you please make the presentation with a larger screen, possibly without the other, if you can?
Let's see if it's actually going to shift. Then that was my concern. I'm pressing the button, but seemingly in Google Meet it's not moving. Have you seen a change?
Presentation mode.
Yes. If you could make the presentation full screen.
Yeah, it's not working. I think, Sean, what you could do at least also is on the left-hand side where the smaller slides are, if you could minimize that, push that across, that might just help as well to make it bigger. I don't know if it's going to help at all, but yeah.
I don't know why in Google Meet, in Zoom and in Teams it always works, and Google Meet.
Yeah.
It's not playing along now. Is that better? Is it slightly bigger now?
Not yet.
Slightly, unless you want to try and close it and reopen it and see if it will then share full screen.
Slideshow on PPT.
Let me stop sharing for a second then and then start sharing again. Let's try that. Let's see if it works better now.
Yes,
it's a little better, yeah.
Good suggestion. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just moving on to from a mining license and regulatory perspective in South Africa. In 2004, the Mineral Petroleum Resources Development Act was developed in South Africa, referred to as MPRDA, was enacted. It replaced the private ownership of mineral and petroleum resources in the country with state ownership and a system of licenses that are issued by the Department of Mineral Resources. Investors who previously possessed these mineral rights were granted licenses if they met the new criteria, including the BE objectives that we mentioned previously. So essentially, you have to have a ownership, a management, etc., of Black representation in the business as well. An amendment was made to the Act in 2014, with the inclusion of some additional issues there, with oil and gas obviously shifted out and some changes made from a BE perspective as well. But the BE issue does definitely remain as part of the mining charter in South Africa. Other relevant statutes in the mining industry in South Africa, the Mining Industry Act from 1967, Precious Metals Act, the Mine Health Act, and the National Environmental Management Act, and then the National Water Act. So various acts are involved regulating the South African mining industry, and again, not dissimilar to what we see in other countries as well. The latest mining charter was released in 2018, and what you will note there as well, that you saw 2002 up ahead, then you saw 2014, and you see a 2018. So there's definitely often changes that are made to the regulation as well, and to the mining charter as well. So there's some changes made to that as well, requiring a minimum of 30% Black economic shareholding in businesses in South Africa and investment. But again, in 2019, there was another amendment made where that 30% was reviewed. So yes, it definitely goes through a process of setting a document in place and then reviews every few years about what is required and how the future will look for the industry going forward. From a registered mines perspective in South Africa, Africa is quite blessed as a mineral-rich country and is listed as the largest producer of platinum, #1 in the world for platinum, coal, #3 in the world, gold, 6th in the world, and diamonds, 7th in the world. South Africa's mineral profile is large and diverse, with many opportunities for international and local investors. On the table on the right there, we've given you a breakdown of the number of mines. Obviously, this is not the volume of production, which is the number of mines across a variety of minerals in South Africa, starting with diamonds, 501 diamond mines in South Africa, coal, gold, silver. PGM refers to the platinum mining happening in South Africa, chrome, copper, etc. So you'll see quite a nice variety of products of minerals that are mined in South Africa. From a mining license and regulatory perspective, if you look at the production, the breakdown of the volume of minerals and products that are produced in South Africa from a mining perspective, you'll see that coal accounts for 27.9% of all minerals mined in South Africa, followed by platinum, gold, iron ore, manganese, etc. But definitely coal and platinum are quite prominent in South Africa. What I want to give you pay your attention to, please, is the chart at the bottom left of the screen here. And essentially what it is, sorry, it's a bit small, so I'll read it out to you. The blue lines represent September 2022, so in 12 months back. The red is year to date, and then 12 months for September to 22. So it's just the trend essentially over the time. And what you'll notice is that majority of these products are seeing declines, unfortunately, in South Africa, with only really diamonds and then copper, and to a smaller degree manganese, showing good growth. Unfortunately, the majority of the categories are under pressure in South Africa, and that's essentially what these three blocks here indicate to you as well. We will see gold, the volume there down by 13%, platinum down by 17%, and as I mentioned previously, as one of the few ones, diamonds seeing in growth of 30%. So there's various reasons that contribute to this. You've got international commodity prices that have affected the market. There's also the regulatory environment, as I showed you in the previous screen, that does change all the time. It obviously does cause some red tape and some frustrations in the industry as well, as it is difficult to keep ahead of what the new regulations are, and obviously changes need to be implemented every time these regulations are made. So there's regulatory issues. There was electricity concerns and electricity constraints in South Africa as well over the last 3-4 years. That made it very difficult for any business, including the mining industry, obviously, to perform. There's been issues, unfortunately, from a labor perspective as well. So really a combination of matters that have contributed to the decline seen across the board in South Africa for the majority of minerals that are mined in the country. And obviously a great issue for South Africa as a country that's very reliant on these minerals as well. From a geological perspective, you'll see that gold really happens within the center of the country. You'll see there within the center of the country, in the Gauteng, Free State, northwest provinces in South Africa. From a diamond perspective, a lot more scattered across the country. And then platinum really happens within the northeast of the country, in Gauteng, Limpopo area, where there's a lot of platinum mining that happens. Amazing to think, if I just highlight this quickly for you, I mentioned previously that South Africa is the largest platinum producer in the world. And it's amazing to think that the platinum production essentially in South Africa happens within a 150 kilometer radius. And that is the biggest volume of platinum that's available in the world. To get the local markets for jewelry and specifically, is that South Africa, before the end of apartheid, as I mentioned previously, between the 60s and 90s in South Africa, there was an era of apartheid. You had a focus on import substitution as a strategy for growth. However, in the 80s, obviously, the strategy was reviewed to be more regulatory, and tariffs and things were implemented. Out of approximately 6,650 lines in South Africa's version of the International Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, there are 276 lines under import control and 177 lines that are under export control. So those tariffs have come in and have been implemented across a variety of products. From a precious metals perspective, The Presidential Act detailing the imports and exports permits in South Africa was commenced in 2007. Import permits require that source, country, volume, etc. are all presented in detail, including what the purpose of the goods that are being imported, what will they be used for, as well as personal and company details are required to be listed for all minerals that are imported and exported out of the country. If we look at specifically at the jewelry industry in South Africa, so what we've included here is the total jewelry industry in South Africa, and this includes imports and local production. And then we've excluded exports from this. So it's essentially what the local consumption is of jewelry in South Africa. So the top left graph there represents the value of the industry in rand terms, which is the local South African currency. And the chart at the bottom here, bottom left, represents exactly the same title, but in euros. And on the right here, we've given you a breakdown of the various jewelry types. If you look at the top left, or the graphs on the left of the screen here, you will note here fairly consistent growth, 5-6% growth in value terms from 2017 to 2019. Unfortunately, COVID declines, and then the industry has not really recovered. If you looked up to 2023, unfortunately, the industry is still way below where it was in 2018 levels, just above 2017 levels. So the industry has struggled to recover from that. If you look at it from a euro perspective, obviously with the negative performance of the local currency as well, you'll see these lines have moved quite significantly. And again, similar pattern though, that the local market has still not recovered to levels that it was at in 2017 from a euro perspective. And again, as I said, the impact of the local currency and the weak performance of the local currency has not helped there. From a breakdown of the jewelry types and the contribution to the total, you'll see that watches account for the largest volume at about also the largest value of the industry at 41.2%, followed by rings at 24.5%, earrings, necklaces, costume jewelry, which I'll get back to later in more detail, bracelets, and then other. So what we've included under other are things like anklets, cufflinks, hairpins, tiaras, etc. for that. But essentially, we've got quite big representation from watches and rings. Moving to the next one, what we've done here is just giving you a breakdown of each one of those products and their performance per year. So look at 2022 versus 2023, and we've given you a CAGR as well. So what has the growth been for all of these products from 2017 through 2023? And again, what we provided here with the top table is in rands, and the table at the bottom is in euro terms. So if we look at the rand perspective, yes, watches again being the most prominent category there, but you'll see as seen decline in the watches category. Different views, different perspectives on watches. Unfortunately, watches obviously being a bit more expensive. The move to more digital watch usage and smart watches has definitely affected the sales of watches in that category. Products like rings remains prominent. I mean, rings are still used in celebrating for a celebratory gift or for engagements, etc. So they remain prominent. Same as earrings. Necklaces a bit less so because obviously a costing issue there. Costume jewelry has done very, very well. You'll see it's the top performer in South Africa, so really imitation jewelry. A lot of it which is imported into South Africa, very low price products, has shown the most growth. And the interesting thing there is that you'll see that 6.4% compound annual growth rate and the 3.5% growth, that is in value terms. But if you look at it in volumes, individual units, individual jewelry pieces, it's actually grown quite more, probably more than double that. So that 3.5% is probably close to 7 or 8%. But obviously, because of the low price of these products and the price that keeps on going down of these products, as well as more and more imports coming, particularly from China, it has definitely affected the value of that industry to the point that there's deflation happening in the industry as well. Bracelets, unfortunately, seeing a decline, and then other fairly flat growth. Overall, only 0.4% growth in the jewelry industry in South Africa. Unfortunately, obviously, when you look at it from a euro perspective, because of the performance of the currency, you see consistent declines throughout. I just want to mention, sorry, when I go back to that slide, I have provided the exchange rate that we've applied for each of these as well, so each of the years. So it's easy for you to see and see if you agree and just see it and implement your own view of it as well, if your own analysis is required on it as well. From a local production versus import perspective, you'll see that local production has declined by 11.5% from 21 to 2022. Exports have declined as well. Imports have grown quite nicely. Overall growth at 5.3%.
please ask you, all my people, to stick to the timetable of the slot assigned, because otherwise we would go too much longer in the presentation.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
So really, local production obviously being under pressure with all the challenges we mentioned earlier. Exports, similarly, obviously with exports, with the exchange rate, etc., affecting exports, and then imports doing quite nicely, particularly coming in from China and India as well. You'll see Italy, they purchased at number 3, and then from an export perspective, really Germany, UAE, etc. Looking at forecasts for the longer term, South African forecast, the industry is forecast to grow at 3.3%. Unfortunately, in euro terms, only at 2%, as the currency is unfortunately expected to remain quite negative. From a trends and drivers perspective, unfortunately, the biggest issue I'm going to take away from this, based on the time restrictions, is that there is deflation happening in the local jewelry industry in South Africa. There are many challenges in the industry. People can't afford the jewelry anymore. They don't have the money for it. They're concerned from a security perspective, going out into public with high-value jewelry. And there's definitely been shifts to lower cost jewelry, like I said, imitation jewelry and costume jewelry becoming more prominent. From an opportunities and threats perspective, barriers perspective, you'll see that from Italian business perspective, really the Italian brand, that's probably the biggest value, the biggest opportunity. The Italian brand carries a lot of value in South Africa, a lot of regard for the Italian brand in South Africa. So the view would be is that when you market that in any jewelry that gets sold in South Africa, the Italian brand has to be very prominent and feature very prominently, because consumers across the board from all the economic spheres are interested in these products and want to buy a product from Italy. From a barriers perspective, I raised a lot of those previously. Really, the country is going through a tougher time. There is some recovery coming through now, but it has gone through a tough time. So something to keep in mind when obviously marketing and selling jewelry to South Africa. From Zimbabwe's perspective, obviously, the Zimbabwe's economy has gone through turmoil. In the 1990s and 2000s, they fast-tracked land reform, where they gave, they confiscated and expropriated land from farmers in the country, which put the country into turmoil. And obviously, as a result of that, foreign currency left the country, investors left the country, and then the country really slumped in terms of manufacturing, hyperinflation hit, and low investor confidence. So some changes happened in 2017, and a political sway in Zimbabwe, which had a new government come in, which said that they wanted to have changes implemented. And yes, they did make some changes, but unfortunately, those changes only went so far. The country is still struggling with some of the issues from the past. You'll see there from a growth perspective in Zimbabwe, unfortunately, all over the place with their growth as well, some negatives, some positives, some declines coming through in 2019. I want to highlight the bottom left graph here for you. Look at the inflation numbers there. 10%, 255%, 500%, 98, 104, 172. I mean, this is as per the World Bank. So unfortunately, inflation is all over the place, making it very difficult to trade in Zimbabwe and very difficult to survive in Zimbabwe as a consumer and as a producer as well, particularly if you consider the GDP per cap at $1,300. That's what the GDP per cap is in Zimbabwe. So a very poor country, and obviously struggling with high inflation as well. From a mining perspective, is that yes, it has a lot of minerals that it mines as well, accounting for 13% of its GDP. It's a highly regulated industry in Zimbabwe as well. So there's a whole lot happening that regulates what the industry is supposed to do, can and can't do, which does restrict activity as well. From a mining rights perspective, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of restrictions. So you have got, similar to South Africa, I guess, the Mining Minerals Act, Environmental Act, and Mining Regulations Act, but you have all of these other acts that regulate the industry as well, adding more red tape to the industry, making it difficult to trade in the industry as well. An interesting move on Zimbabwe's government happened in 2022 is that they have banned the exports of raw minerals, which have not been beneficiated to be produced in Zimbabwe. Essentially what they're saying is that there has to be a value add to any mineral that gets exported from the country. You cannot export any mineral in pure form from the country anymore, which obviously with the aim of improving the local production in the country. You remember South Africa is doing the same thing, reducing it by 20%. Zimbabwe went a blanket regulation and implemented it instantly that this rule happened. So obviously some good, some bad in that. Good that obviously it assists local producers and the local industry. Bad that it makes it difficult from a regulatory perspective in the country, difficult getting minerals out of the country from both miners and obviously people that are wanting to import out of the country or export out of the country as well. So different challenges faced by that. Really from the mining perspective, where the geographical locations are really well distributed throughout the country, and you see the gold deposits, these areas here are similar as well. So the major players in the industry is not really relevant. There are some challenges in the country as well, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's a very poor country, so obviously it has challenges as well. So we have a lot of illegal mining that happens in the country as well. And unfortunately, what happens as well, as mentioned on the right here, is that you have a lot of child mining that happens in the country as well. Something that you do see in the region, you do see it in Zambia, you do see it in the DRC as well. It's prominent, happens in the country, and as I mentioned, with the impact of an impoverished country, it unfortunately does happen that illegal mining and child mining happens. The mining life cycle, it's really a standard life cycle as per most industries in mining industries and mining countries as well around the world. From a jewelry perspective, again, that change in export. So USA got a lot of minerals in Zimbabwe, but you can't export those minerals. So there's supposed to be planned to be some benefits to the local industry. Obviously, you got quite a few retailers that are active in the industry. So it's quite a buoyant industry, which is good. Unfortunately, like I said, the players aren't the consumers don't have much money in the country to deal with it. Yes, you've got quotas on exports, as I mentioned already, that's been brought into place. And then all gold and all diamonds, everything that's sold to the country has to go through one regulatory body in the country as well. You can't just export gold out of Zimbabwe. It has to be done through one single body, which obviously adds more red tape, etc. Moving on to the jewelry specifically, you'll see there that Zimbabwe, again, what we have on the left here is from a US dollar perspective, which is what the currency that gets used in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe doesn't really have its own currency. It's launched a few over the years, but since 2000 and the issues they had there, it's really they just got rid of their local currency and mainly trade in the US dollar. And the bottom here, we've got the euro numbers as well. And you'll see they're quite inconsistent growth over the years, obviously recovery post-COVID. Similar trend to what we saw in South Africa, though, is that in 2024, $145 million US, still not what it was in 2017. Obviously, the same applies from a euro perspective. Similar, if you look at the breakdown there, watches account for a big share again, brings some similarities to what you see in South Africa. The only difference being that costume jewelry comes in at number 3 and seeing significant growth there, again, being sold at a lower price versus alternatives. If you look at the growth for each of the categories over the years, you'll see that all of them really seeing declines. Again, similar to South Africa, again, the costume jewelry, imitation jewelry seeing good growth. And again, that's from a value perspective in dollar terms. If you look at individual units, there's most definitely seeing quite aggressive growth in the market as well. From a production perspective, you'll see the local production seeing growth at 3%. Like I said, that regulatory changes made in Zimbabwe, that everything has to have a value add. All minerals have to have a value add before it gets exported, made a big difference to local production. Exports are still minimal. Unfortunately, there's some challenges from an export perspective, mainly regulatory, and then imports still remain prominent. If you look at the imports coming into the country, it really comes from UAE, Mauritius, UK, and Italy comes in at 4th place, and exports really going through UAE, going to UAE again, UK. South Africa, obviously, as a neighbor, being a prominent contributor there. Looking forward for Zimbabwe, growth expected at 3.3% over the longer term, and from a euro terms at 3.4%. So, yeah, fairly good growth. Like I said, though, the majority of that growth comes from imitation jewelry. Yes, the Zimbabwe industry has recorded some growth over the years. Unfortunately, they've got lots of challenges in Zimbabwe. Like I said, from a regulatory perspective, from a consumer disparity perspective, consumers not being able to afford jewelry. There's a lot of red tape in the industry as well for producing products and for exporting products and for importing products. Currency issues, they don't have available local currency. So yes, a whole lot of challenges in the industry. From a positive perspective, though, is that the country has obviously made those changes from a regulation, so it should promote local industry and assist local traders in the industry as well. And yeah, that should be a benefit for the industry going forward. There were sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe in late 1990s and early 2000s. A lot of those sanctions are being eased now, which is also obviously aiding the country as well and will assist them going forward to get industries and get industries producing and going forward as well. From an opportunity perspective, I mean, similar again, that Italian brand carries a whole lot of value there. Something to consider when marketing and selling in Zimbabwe. Another thing to mention as well, with this change in their regulation that you're not allowed to export in everything has to be produced locally, there's definitely opportunity there to partner with local players and see what can be done with local players. From a value add perspective, there's a lot of money going into that. From a government perspective, there's a lot of players looking at that. So there's definitely an opportunity there. From a barrier perspective, I think I've mentioned so many throughout the presentation. Unfortunately, there's lots of barriers to trading in Zimbabwe. It's definitely a one to watch out for the future, though. Zimbabwe used to be known as the breadbasket of Africa, very prominent in Southern Africa in the 70s and 80s and early 90s as well. Unfortunately, the opposite upheaval happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, but did change that country a lot. The view is still that Zimbabwe has a lot of potential going forward. So yes, it is going through a tough time now, but like I said, as with these changes in regulation, which hopefully should assist some and will against others, but assist local trading at least, number one. Number two, with the easing of sanctions that have happened in Zimbabwe as well, most definitely it will have a positive effect on the country for the longer term, but does require obviously a long-term view and a long-term vision, a long-term commitment to the country as well. That is what I've prepared for you. Sorry, I did speed it up quite significantly there at the end, just based on the timing restriction that we had. I did throw quite a lot at you. I don't know if there's any questions. If you have anything to talk about, really what we're saying is both the countries going through challenges, both the countries struggling a bit. But yeah, a lot of positives there, very diverse countries in terms of mineral availability, and a lot of trading happening and a lot of interest in the countries going forward as well. And some positives in the countries as well. Like I said, South Africa, the electricity load shedding has eased, which has helped the local trading. And some regulatory changes and government changes, shifts in the country as well, which is also assisting. And then Zimbabwe, the same. Some long-term good things happening in Zimbabwe, particularly with the easing of sanctions in that country as well.
Sorry, can we ask questions? Or
of course, yes.
Me, I'm the regional director of an Italian jewelry company responsible for Africa and the GCC. It's Pasquale Bruni. We actually are distributed, we start to be distributed in some countries like Nigeria, Angola, Costa d'Avorio. And in our approach actually to those markets, still the customer are visiting us during trade shows, for example, Geneva. My question is, if we wanted to accelerate the process with Africa, and we speak about smaller countries like Zimbabwe, we can use, you suggest to use the Chamber of Commerce as a possible partner in finding out eventual entrepreneurs that can open shops for our brand. What would you recommend? Because traveling in those countries is not easy. Or at least it's not easy if you at least don't have a first contact that you know will welcome you. So what would you recommend to a manager like me in my position to approach these markets? This is the first question. And the second, we have a price range that is today 5 to 10,000 euro per single.
Miss Stefani, chiedo scusa per l'interruzione. Direi però di procedere come avevamo detto dall'inizio, che intanto facciamo le presentazioni prima e poi dopo, dopo possiamo passare alle domande. Mi scusi tanto, abbiamo
I think I ran over. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
But yes, we can talk about that going forward. Yes, if you want to email me, we can talk.
I'm sorry. We have okay. Let's go on, please. So I would like now. I would like now to let Mr. the director of ICE Addis Abeba, Mr. Claudio Pasquale.
Sorry, Giuseppe, we are missing Zambia, which
sorry. Okay, sorry, Gianluca. Okay, please. Thank you.
We will make it very, very quickly, but we will have an overlook of Zambia. Thank you.
Va bene. E io approfitto ancora per ricordare a tutte le aziende che le domande potranno essere fatte al termine delle varie presentazioni, così da ottimizzare i tempi. Vi chiedo scusa e vi ringrazio. Allora, Gianluca, prego, passiamo alla presentazione dello Zambia. Grazie.
Yes, Alex, please, will you start your presentation about Zambia?
Okay, thank you. Have I been given rights to share my presentation, or do you have it there on your computer so that I just run through it?
Alex, you should be good to go. I just started presenting. At the bottom of the screen, you've got the present option, and then go. Try the full screen though, because that's where I have the challenges. So perhaps you go with full screen, you'll be all right, Alex.
Are you showing your screen, please?
Okay. Mm. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah, now I'm struggling to make it the full screen, but you can see the whole slide, can you?
No.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we'll start, I'll briefly run you through our presentation. Of course, the first thing is we were contracted by the Italian Trade Agency. I represent a company called Air Trade Partners, and we looked at the market for jewelry and mining in Zambia. So basically, why did we do that? Of course, the Italian Trade Agency was looking at opportunities for Italian companies to invest in Zambia, both direct or in conjunction with existing companies. So we did a bit of a deep dive on that one. So I won't go through all these others. So how did we do it? We used the mixed methods, primary and secondary data sources. We did our desk research. We did a bit of stakeholder engagement, data analysis, and then we reported on what our findings were. The limitations that we had, we were limited to Lusaka, and some of the issues that we faced were, of course, some of the stakeholders were not available, but we had to find other ways of triangulating the information. So looking at the structure of the Zambian mining and jewelry, we looked at the government policy framework. We also tried to look at the large multinational firms, but our main interest was on the artisanal and small scale mining. This is where you find the gold, precious and semi-precious stones. We also looked at, to a large scale, on the suppliers who supply into the mines. What are the issues they have, and what are the solutions? We also did a brief look at the gem exchange, lapidaries, and the jewelers that are available in Zambia. This diagram shows you our portrayment of the mining and jewelry value chain. Okay, we have the exploration, then you get the license, production, treatment, that's a beneficiation, and then the final product or the polished product is exported to other countries for further processing into finished products. Again, if you look at the flow chart, exploration, the methods used, of course, is geoscience surveys, then discoveries, you look at the quality, and then you do the investment and the planning. Development, of course, you're talking about the feasibility, and then the production, you're looking at extraction, milling, processing, and secondary processing. Then creating value as we export.
Alex, if you could speed it up a little bit, we would let other intervention and presentation to take their own time.
Definitely.
Please.
Okay, so I'll just pick the most critical one. So our production statistics we looked at was from 2018 to 2022. The biggest in terms of value was nickel, followed by copper, then amethyst, which is a semi-precious stone. So the minerals that we looked at was nickel, copper, cobalt, emeralds, gold, amethyst, and tourmaline. Okay. Then we also looked at base metals in terms of now export values. The main export markets were, of course, for our main product, copper, and the rest is Switzerland, China, Egypt, Singapore, and the USA. Imports, there are base metals which are imported, because remember, we don't have a well-defined manufacturing base. So they go for intermediate manufacturing and then brought back for finishing. and part of the jewelry also comes in through the imports. These are the figures that we. Okay. Okay. On the framework, there's been a bit of a turmoil, just like what my other colleague was talking about in Zimbabwe. A lot of changes in the policies and the modus operandi, depending on the government which is sitting there, government of the day. We've also had those challenges, but slowly we are also coming back now to a point of convergence between government, private sector, and also the policymakers. So challenges that were faced, according to our findings, insufficient working capital. In terms of preparing proposals for getting licensing, of course, it was highly priced. Quality and efficiency challenges, we are still a long way from getting a very good quality product in terms of, especially in terms of jewelry and semi-precious stone. Equipment and technology is also a challenge because most of it, almost everything is imported. Skills, we are still building on our skill base. And then cultural connotations. Jewelry is not really looked at culturally as something that is encouraged. Then we don't have statistics as well as the environmental challenges. Okay. Opportunities for Italian companies. So there's opportunities for financing and mining technology in equipment, machinery, tools, with emphasis on artisanal and small-scale mining sector. Also, government partnership for geological mapping. We haven't had updated geological survey of the country until last year when they started looking at that. Then, of course, look at the soft skills for gemstone processing and lapidary training. That is one of the, as well as the PDU. Downstream industries for green economy. So this is when you look at the EV market, which is coming up. Yeah, I'm sure you're aware of the American investment in the Lobito corridor. That is looking at downstream industries for car batteries. And then working on the reforms that are ongoing, there are also opportunities there for private sector from Italy to get involved. So prospects, I think I've already spoken about this. Barriers to entry, restrictions and bottlenecks. Insufficient data on consumption patterns. We do not have that in the country. There's also been a decline in the local jewelry industry. And then also cultural perceptions as a barrier. That is, I think, self-explanatory. There's absence of a lack of clear policy framework and funding. Impact of unrestricted imports. I think my colleague also talking from Zimbabwe, on the Zimbabwean aspect, I think he touched on this one. We are facing the same situation where we have finished products, some of them imitations, coming and collapsing the industry. So recommendations that we put forward is we should demand for affordable modern tools and equipment to enable the sector produce in a very efficient manner. There are issues of secular business opportunities that we can look at, development of technical skills, business skills, and also networking and supply chain development to support the procurement process. Okay. And then also we need to have a sustainable and inclusive business as well as financing instruments that we can try and make sure that the smaller guys who are facing challenges can work on. Also working with the local content developers, looking at the statutes as they stand. What is it that we can do to enhance the quality, quantity, as well as consistency of the local products? I think I end there. Thank you very much. Unless there are questions.
Thank you, Mr. Valletta. We appreciate
Thank
it very
you,
much.
Alex. Thank you, Sean, for your highly appreciated presentation and your valuable insight documents that we are sharing with our Italian companies.
You're welcome.
Vorrei ringraziare le aziende che si sono trattenute fino ad ora su questi 3 mercati, ricordando che il nostro ufficio è disponibile a ricevere le vostre richieste di informazione e di approfondimento. È sufficiente una mail a ICE Johannesburg, e questo ci consentirà anche di costruire delle risposte articolate che non si limiteranno ai pochi minuti disponibili ora. Per quanto riguarda la domanda che era stata posta, almeno parzialmente vorrei dare una prima risposta. Chiaramente ogni azienda è libera di affrontare il mercato seguendo le strade che preferisce. Noi come ICE oggi vi abbiamo offerto questa opportunità, quindi siamo disponibili anche a seguirvi con il nostro osservatorio ad Harare e a Lusaka, oltre che con l'ufficio di Johannesburg, sui 3 mercati a disposizione. Per il resto possiamo anche rivedere le vostre necessità con l'ufficio merceologico e con gli altri uffici sui quali vorrete rivolgere la vostra attenzione. Da parte di ICE Johannesburg, grazie a tutti, rimaniamo a vostra disposizione come sempre. Un buon pomeriggio e una prosecuzione ai colleghi.
Gianluca, grazie. Passerei quindi la parola al direttore di ICE Addis Abeba, Claudio Pasqualucci. Grazie.
Buongiorno, grazie Giuseppe, buon pomeriggio a tutti quanti. Sì, anch'io mi ricollego velocemente a quanto ricordava Gianluca Atena in merito al supporto che gli uffici ICE possono dare per gli approfondimenti sul mercato. Peraltro, come chiedeva il dottor Stefani, proprio la ricerca di partners commerciali, quindi importatori, distributori, diciamo, è il nostro pane quotidiano, lo facciamo tutti i giorni per vari settori, grazie ai nostri trade analyst che conoscono bene i mercati, per cui ecco, abbiate la volontà di iscriverci, di contattarci, e questo credo sia una risposta dovuta che include tutti gli uffici oggi presenti. Io sono Claudio Pasqualucci, sono direttore da pochissimo, da poche settimane, da 2 settimane sono direttore dell'ufficio di Addis Abeba. In realtà in questo momento vi parlo da Beirut, perché stiamo concludendo il passaggio di consegna con una responsabile, per cui se doveste sentire qualche rumore particolarmente forte, cali di corrente, insomma, è normale, purtroppo rientra un po' nella norma di questo travagliato paese. Quindi da Beirut però parleremo di Africa orientale, in particolare di Etiopia e Tanzania. Ora un attimo solo che passo alla presentazione. Ecco, la vedete, giusto?
Sì.
Ok,
sì.
ora passo invece qua. Ecco, si vede dall'inizio, giusto?
Sì, vediamo.
Perché io purtroppo non vedo più lo schermo, per cui ecco, ho bisogno della vostra conferma in questo. Allora, dicevo, parliamo di Etiopia. L'Etiopia, come vedete anche dall'ubicazione geografica, è il secondo paese più popoloso dell'Africa dopo la Nigeria. È ubicato nell'Africa orientale, ovviamente è un paese, è un'area geografica che per vari motivi ha collegamenti storici ed importanti con l'Italia. Sono moltissime le persone che studiano italiano, che sono anche di nazionalità italiana, quindi diciamo che l'Italia è un paese che è molto ben conosciuto in Etiopia, è un paese che continua a proporre particolari sostegni al paese dell'Africa orientale, e soprattutto è un paese le cui imprese sono ben conosciute in questo mercato. Vorrei dare soltanto due cenni veloci sul potenziale e le opportunità del settore minerario. Ovviamente tutto il resto, la mia presentazione oggi vuole essere un percorso insieme per capire cosa si possa fare in Etiopia, qual è la situazione del paese per quanto riguarda la presenza di metalli e minerali gemme preziose. Poi ovviamente tutta una serie di dati li rimanderei soprattutto all'approfondimento delle ricerche di mercato che verranno messe a vostra disposizione, e poi, come ricordavo in precedenza, soprattutto al contatto diretto con il nostro ufficio.
Claudio, chiedo scusa se nel frattempo puoi far cominciare a scorrere anche le slide, per cortesia.
Sì, non stanno scorrendo?
No, ancora no.
Non sta scorrendo? Queste sono informazioni generali con il rosso?
No. Questo qua compare al momento in schermo più grande, proprio la prima slide, però le altre ancora no. Ok, ora queste
Io
informazioni generali, ok.
allora, adesso invece la vedete?
Questa sì.
Non capisco perché non mi... Torno un attimo alla prima, la vedete la prima?
No, questa è quella Etiopia, il potenziale del paese e
Sì.
opportunità del settore.
Ora
Ok.
questa con l'Etiopia in rosso?
Sì,
Allora, se non vi dispiace la tengo così, evidentemente non prende la presentazione come invece avevo suggerito al collega precedente.
va bene.
Riuscite a seguire un po'
Sì, Claudio, va bene.
Ok, va bene. Allora, dicevo, qualche cenno veloce sull'Etiopia. L'Etiopia è una Repubblica Federale Democratica, capitale Addis Abeba, ovviamente si estende su una superficie di oltre 1 milione di chilometri quadrati. La lingua ufficiale è l'amarico, le lingue commerciali sono l'amarico e l'inglese. Come dicevo, è il secondo paese più popoloso del continente africano dopo la Nigeria, con quasi 127 milioni di abitanti di popolazione. Il 22% si tratta di popolazione urbana, mentre quasi l'80% è radicato nelle campagne etiope. Vedremo poi anche questo aspetto che riflesso ha sulla produzione economica del paese. Per quanto riguarda l'economia, l'Etiopia ha un tasso di crescita fortemente sostenuto, oltre il 7,3%, dati della giornata del 23, ma già vi posso dire che già in questi primi, diciamo, 10 mesi, 11 mesi dell'anno in corso, la crescita è stata addirittura superiore. Devo anche ricordare che l'Etiopia fino a pochi anni fa, fino a 2 anni fa, è stato un paese travagliato per una serie di rivolte interne, e ancora la componente tribale è particolarmente forte e di conseguenza ci sono tensioni. Adesso il paese sembra essere pacificato, salvo alcune piccole sacche, chiamiamo di resistenza, soprattutto nel nord-est del paese, nella zona del Tigray. Come vedete dalla slide, l'economia si compone soprattutto di servizi agroindustriali e soprattutto l'industria. L'industria per un paese così grande ancora un livello di penetrazione e di sviluppo basso, e questo consente poi una serie di ragionamenti che cercheremo di sviluppare poi successivamente. Il reddito nazionale è poco superiore ai $1.000, però attraverso una serie di riforme socio-economiche che l'attuale Presidente del Consiglio sta cercando di portare avanti, l'obiettivo è quello entro il 2025 di avere un livello di reddito medio-basso, quindi superiore a quello precedente entro appunto il 2025. Queste sono le riforme di cui accennavo, sono soprattutto dei progetti di riforme, ripeto, socio-economiche che hanno fortemente sostenuti dai donors internazionali come il Fondo Monetario Internazionale e la Banca Mondiale. E recentissimamente, parlo veramente di poche settimane fa, è stato introdotto, sostanzialmente è stato abolito, sono stati aboliti tutti quei meccanismi di mercato nero, quindi ora il cambio è fisso, giornalmente la banca centrale fissa un tasso di cambio tra il BIR etiope, quindi la valuta locale, e le principali valute internazionali, ma soprattutto queste riforme presentano un fortissimo focus sulla promozione del settore privato attraverso la costituzione di parchi industriali, di zone industriali, attraverso una serie di riforme del sistema fiscale, di incentivi all'occupazione in zone rurali. Si sta cercando quindi progressivamente di trasformare il paese da un paese a vocazione prettamente agricola a un paese dove possa crescere il tasso di industrializzazione. E su questo aspetto mi fa piacere citare il forte rapporto di partenariato strategico che esiste tra l'Italia e l'Etiopia. Ricordavo prima un po' la realtà del paese, insomma, il passato che ha visto l'Italia molto presente in Etiopia. È opportuno ricordare che l'Etiopia è uno dei principali paesi per quanto riguarda il piano Mattei, che sostanzialmente tende a sviluppare nel paese dei piani di sviluppo di industrializzazione per collaborare col sistema delle imprese italiane. faccio solo un esempio per spiegare meglio cosa stiamo lavorando. Ad esempio, partirà a breve, inizio dell'anno prossimo, un centro tecnologico vicino a Addis Abeba per la lavorazione, per lo studio, la formazione della lavorazione del marmo, attraverso l'utilizzo di know-how, tecnologia italiana. Questo ci consente a noi di avere una progressiva penetrazione in questo processo di industrializzazione del paese. A livello commerciale, a livello insomma, di relazioni commerciali tra due paesi, abbiamo poco, nel senso che esportiamo poco in Italia e in Etiopia, voglio dire, ovviamente anche l'Etiopia ha un certo accesso al mercato italiano, soprattutto per quanto riguarda i prodotti agricoli, il caffè in particolare, ma per quanto riguarda il mercato di destinazione per l'export italiano siamo oltre il 100° posto, con veramente poco, meno dello 0% sul totale dell'export italiano. Ciò tuttavia non deve raffreddare l'interesse verso questo paese che, come ricordavo, sta vivendo una fase di fortissima crescita ed espansione e soprattutto si sta dotando di un piano infrastrutturale che renderà maggiormente agevole l'accesso verso le zone periferiche del paese, dove appunto, entrando proprio nel merito della nostra conversazione di oggi, sono ubicate le principali, diciamo, risorse minerarie ed aurifere. Questa, vedete, è una panoramica del paese, ripeto, sono oltre 1 milione di chilometri quadrati, è un paese ricchissimo dal punto di vista delle risorse minerarie, metalli, minerali energetici, oltre 40 varietà di gemme preziose come zaffiri, smeraldi, vedremo poi nelle slide successive maggiormente il dettaglio. Tuttavia, nonostante questa abbondanza di risorse naturali, il contributo al PIL del paese è modesto, soprattutto perché i sistemi di estrazione sono ancora particolarmente artigianali, informali, a fortissimo labor intense, quindi diciamo lo sviluppo tecnologico dell'industria mineraria è molto basso e infatti, come vedete, nonostante veramente delle dotazioni importanti, delle risorse importanti di minerali e pietre preziose, contribuisce a meno dell'1% del PIL e soltanto al 14% delle esportazioni. Vedete poi qua, insomma, ecco la geografizzazione delle risorse minerarie. Andando avanti, per quanto riguarda le risorse naturali più presenti nel paese, abbiamo oro, platino, tantalio, moltissimo rame, molto ferro, marmo, ricordavo il centro tecnologico di cui parlavo prima, e soprattutto per quanto riguarda pietre preziose, vedete la lista, opali, smeraldi, zaffiri, ambre, rubini, acqua marina. Insomma, sostanzialmente è un paese che fortunatamente per loro gode di un buonissimo asset minerario. Per quanto riguarda l'Italia, come dicevo, abbiamo visto prima che i rapporti commerciali e industriali sono modesti, quindi il nostro ruolo nel paese è soprattutto orientato verso il supporto tecnico, lo sviluppo delle infrastrutture con attenzione alla sostenibilità, alla cooperazione bilaterale. Ecco, anche qua mi piace ricordare il ruolo dell'Agenzia italiana per la cooperazione e lo sviluppo, entità con la quale noi come ICE, Ministero Affari Esteri, collaboriamo a stretto contatto. Quindi diciamo, l'obiettivo in questo momento è quello di cercare di sviluppare, per quanto riguarda il comparto minerario, modernizzare in maniera sostenibile il settore, renderlo maggiormente efficiente, in modo tale da contribuire allo sviluppo socio-economico del paese, cercare di creare posti di lavoro in aree remote del paese affinché non ci sia un costante afflusso in città, nella capitale, e quindi contribuire, diciamo, a un migliore sviluppo della situazione geopolitica interna, anche e soprattutto per evitare alcune tensioni che ricordavo prima. Per quanto riguarda le licenze e incentivi per gli investimenti minerari, diciamo, sono procedure abbastanza standard. Ovviamente, come in tutti i paesi africani, occorre avere buona entratura. Anche su questo il nostro ufficio può aiutare decisamente chi dovesse essere interessato. È il Ministero del Petrolio e delle Miniere etiope che rilascia le licenze per la ricognizione, l'esplorazione e l'estrazione. Gli incentivi includono esenzioni fiscali e royalty modeste proprio per attrarre investitori. Dicevo prima, appunto parlando di gemmi, la quantità e la varietà è estremamente importante. Recentemente sono stati anche trovati granato verde, ritrovati giacimenti di granato verde, cromo, e il settore globale ha raggiunto l'anno scorso, il 23, oltre 32 miliardi di dollari, ed è soprattutto grazie anche a questi processi di miglioramento dell'industria estrattiva si prevede una crescita annua importante del 5,6%, quindi si stima che da qua a 9 anni, 10 anni, il valore globale dei prodotti estrattivi possa raggiungere quasi 56 miliardi di dollari da qua a 10 anni. Si è riusciti a vedere, queste sono delle qualità soprattutto di opale, che l'opale è il minerale maggiormente presente e maggiormente riconosciuto per quanto riguarda il settore estrattivo. Vedete qua una varietà di colorazioni, insomma, interessante, e soprattutto grazie alla loro qualità le miniere che sono ubicate prevalentemente nel sud del paese di Wollo e Sciwa stanno acquisendo una notorietà internazionale piuttosto importante, e soprattutto chi dovesse ipotizzare di aprire degli impianti produttivi in Etiopia per lavorare questi prodotti e esportare il prodotto finito potrebbe riceve ci sono degli schemi governativi che consentono di avere agevolazioni particolarmente importanti. Vedete ad esempio, a titolo di esempio, le tasse royalty variano dal 2 al 7%, mentre poi anche il requisito di capitale investito in un'operazione industriale è piuttosto modesto, 5%. Qui parliamo un po' di volume di produzione dei minerali. Anche qua, se riuscite a vedere la cartina, vedete, ragioniamo un po' sul nord del paese, prevalentemente, a parte le miniere di opale che invece sono ubicate al sud, dove ovviamente è fortissima la presenza in arancione del Canada e in giallo degli Stati Uniti. Molto poche sono le aziende locali rispetto al volume degli investitori esteri. Sono queste appunto segnate in verde, e poi ci sono licenze in concessione che sono ancora minori. Quindi questo vuol dire che è importante collegarsi con operatori locali per poter avere la possibilità di fare scouting delle eventuali siti potenzialmente ricchi di minerali e poi eventualmente procedere all'industrializzazione. Un attimo solo, scusatemi.
Chiedo scusa a Claudio, se mi permetto, se per cortesia puoi in qualche modo anche velocizzare o comunque visti i tempi, insomma, abbiamo poco tempo per passare anche all'altro collega.
Sì, ditemi voi, io posso anche...
No, qualche altro minuto va benissimo. Visto
che precedentemente è stato lungo il tempo.
Sì, chiedo scusa, chiediamo scusa.
Parliamo di oro in Etiopia, che è un'ulteriore risorsa particolarmente importante. Storicamente la prima estrazione risale ad oltre 3.500 anni fa. Purtroppo, per quanto i volumi siano importanti, per quanto i giacimenti siano particolarmente importanti, le esportazioni sono calate moltissimo a partire da 10 anni a questa parte, dal 2013, soprattutto a causa della arretratezza dei sistemi estrattivi e soprattutto una serie di vendite su canali informali che il governo sta cercando di razionalizzare e sistematizzare. Come dicevo appunto, l'estrazione preferisce il mercato informale. Attraverso la banca commerciale dell'Etiopia, la banca commerciale, sono stati istituiti dei centri di acquisto per regolarizzare le vendite, e purtroppo ancora c'è una forte fuga dell'oro etiope verso l'estero per essere raffinato all'estero, proprio perché non esistono in Etiopia dei centri di raffinazione sofisticati adeguati agli standard internazionali, mentre poi una parte viene fornita a gioielleri locali. In conclusione, ecco, poi su questo, Giuseppe, se d'accordo, magari mi finirei, a meno che non vogliate continuare velocemente sull'Uganda. Comunque sostanzialmente l'industria mineraria in Etiopia ha decenni ancora di basso sviluppo, pur nonostante la presenza di un forte potenziale. Le opportunità sono molteplici per quanto riguarda l'investimento produttivi nei servizi di accompagnamento, quindi standardizzazione, laboratorio e consulenza. È un forte potenziale per quanto riguarda l'esplorazione, come dicevo prima, in quelle aree dove la fornitura di macchinari pesanti, indagini geologiche, know-how in generale, attrezzature laboratorio possono essere di aiuto allo sviluppo del sistema minerario locale. Bisognerebbe, anzi stiamo cercando di ragionare insieme alle autorità locali per avere una sorta di razionalizzazione dei fabbisogni per quanto riguarda il settore minerario, per quanto riguarda selezione di attrezzature, la formazione del personale e i servizi di scouting. Io con questo concluderei per quanto riguarda l'Etiopia. Ripeto, gran parte delle informazioni sono a disposizione nelle guide, nelle ricette per realizzare consulenti. Ditemi voi se qualche minuto, qualche slide veloce sull'Uganda, oppure diciamo così.
Penso di sì, Claudio, qualche minuto, ma giusto qualche minuto per una presentazione veloce. Ti ringrazio, grazie.
Grazie a voi. Salto un po' queste note di carattere geopolitico dell'Uganda, in cui parliamo di un paese come l'Etiopia con scarso accesso al mare, sempre ubicato nell'area dell'Africa orientale, Repubblica Federale, anche in questo caso a forte vocazione presidenziale. La demografia, parliamo di 50 milioni di abitanti, di cui il 73% in zone rurali. Per quanto riguarda le risorse naturali, in Uganda sono presenti oro, rame e cobalto, stagno, tantalite, ferro e fosfati, molte risorse idriche, legni e foreste e pietre preziose. È prevalentemente un paese a vocazione agricola, nonostante che l'industria sia fortemente importante, così come i servizi raggiungono una quota importante sul PIL del 53%, 50%. Anche in questo caso il PIL pro capite è modesto, parliamo di circa $1.000 per persona. Per quanto riguarda i minerali preziosi dell'Uganda, ecco anche qua vedo una geolocalizzazione. È stata fatta una mappatura su circa l'89% dei giacimenti minerari. Non so se siete pratici della geografia di questo paese, comunque troviamo l'oro nel nord del paese, rame, marmo, fosfati nel centro, e purtroppo i dati non sono particolarmente aggiornati. Il contributo al PIL è pari all'1,4% nel 21-22. Purtroppo in alcuni paesi, come potete immaginare, reperire informazioni non è particolarmente agevole. Per quanto riguarda l'esportazione, l'oro è stato esportato per oltre $2 miliardi nel 2020, con una crescita annuale importantissima del 58%. C'è stato un calo, poi anche voi, tutto il rispetto per gli amici dell'Uganda, sapete che spesse volte, per quanto riguarda particolarmente l'oro, si ricevono offerte bizzarre, e quindi questo può incidere negativamente un po' sulla percezione che il paese può offrire all'estero. Anche per quanto riguarda il commercio minerario tra Italia e Uganda, come vedete, parliamo di cifre particolarmente modeste, che non vale anche la pena di sottolineare. Per quanto riguarda il settore dell'oro, ancora parliamo di 31 milioni di tonnellate metriche. Come in tutta l'Africa, le aziende cinesi, le aziende estrattive cinesi hanno un ruolo particolarmente importante. C'è un obiettivo per diventare un hub geografico per la commercializzazione dell'oro. Come vedete, qua ancora il marketing dell'oro grezzo, lingotti d'oro, gioielleria è particolarmente segmentato. C'è un metodo di negoziazione particolarmente sviluppato a Kampala, la capitale over the counter OTC, quindi c'è sostanzialmente uno scambio diretto tra valuta e oro, oppure una sorta di barter tra minerali grezzi, lingotti e moneti. Quindi insomma è ancora un mercato che ha bisogno di una fortissima regolamentazione. Anche qua le opportunità sono quelle relative all'industrializzazione del paese. L'Uganda si vuole porre come leader regionale per proporre incentivi per attrarre investitori. Ovviamente rispetto all'Etiopia è un paese con un asset, diciamo, normativo e industriale ancora un pochino da osservare, per cui probabilmente ancora operazioni importanti in Uganda sono ancora un pochino premature. Io concluderei così, salvo vostre domande, questi sono i nostri contatti, ICE Addis Abeba è competente, ovviamente Uganda, Somalia, Ruanda e Djibouti, siamo a vostra disposizione. Grazie e buon proseguimento.
Claudio, grazie molte e io direi di passare per i successivi mercati la parola al collega di ICE Luanda, Andrea Ferrari. Grazie.
Buongiorno a tutti, sono Andrea Ferrari, direttore dell'ICE di Luanda, ufficio che segue 5 paesi: Angola, Congo-Kinshasa, Congo-Brazzaville, Camerun e Gabon. E lo studio di mercato realizzato per questa iniziativa riguarda il settore minerario in Angola, con particolare focus al settore aurifero. L'Angola è anche uno dei principali produttori di diamanti e anche dei grossi giacimenti di terre rare. Il mercato angolano è interessante per le imprese italiane in 3 aree. Una è quella ovviamente della collaborazione con imprese locali nelle attività di estrazione e trasferimento tecnologico. Seconda area è quella della collaborazione industriale con produttori e designer angolani nel settore della gioielleria. Terza area invece è l'importazione diciamo, di gioielleria in Angola, che normalmente però è triangolata da via Portogallo, Emirati Arabi Uniti e India, anche se riscontriamo che quando portiamo degli operatori angolani alle fiere, Vicenza Oro, eccetera, si creano poi anche dei canali diretti. Da citare infine il progetto strategico del corridoio di Lobito, che praticamente collega a livello di trasporto ferroviario l'Angola con Congo-Kinshasa e lo Zambia, per trasportare tutti i minerali preziosi verso il porto di Lobito in Angola e la sua esportazione verso l'Occidente, e con anche un potenziale per il futuro di sviluppo di trasformazione dei minerali in loco. Proprio in questi giorni c'è la presenza del Presidente degli Stati Uniti qui in Angola per visitare questo Lobito con il centro e probabilmente insomma stanziare dei finanziamenti in questo ambito. Lo studio, diciamo, è stato incaricato per l'Angola alla società di consulenza Geographic Studies Institute, e quindi darei adesso la parola al signor Alberto Fanzoni. Mr. Fanzoni, I'm giving you the floor so you can start with the presentation. Thank you. Siamo ovviamente a disposizione con le aziende italiane poi di organizzare delle video call individuali, insomma ci scrivete con molto piacere.
Thank you, Andrea Ferrari. So I will start the presentation of the study on Angola mining sector with emphasis on gold and diamonds. So I will cover 8 main aspects, namely the country overview, the mining sector, business environment in Angola, the gold sector, sustainability and social responsibility, infrastructure, key advantages for investors, and why Italian companies should choose Angola. So in terms of the country overview, Angola is the 6th largest country in Africa, with an area of 1.2 square kilometers. It shares borders with the Republic of Congo, the DRC, Zambia, and Namibia. So currently, Angola has 21 provinces, and its capital is Luanda. And as Andrea Ferrari highlighted, we currently have President Biden in Angola, and tomorrow there will be a summit that includes Angola, DRC, Zambia, and the discussion will be about the Lobito corridor. Okay, the Angolan economy is heavily reliant in oil, which is the main contributor to its gross domestic product, the GDP, accounting for 30.4 in 2023. The key sectors beyond oil include trade with the 27%, agriculture and forestry with 77.7%, manufacturing with 6.5%, and other services with 8.6%. Angola's diamond industry also showed growth with 12% rise in revenue, driven by a significant increase in production from 2022 up to 2023 and beyond. In 2024, this year, the exchange rate increased to 950 kwanza per USD, and it tends to increase a little bit more. The average annual inflation for 2023 reached 13%, and currently is around 27%. Regarding the mining sector and the regulation and legislation, the Constitution of the Republic of Angola stated that natural resources, solid, liquid, or gaseous, existing in the soil, subsoil, territorial sea, and exclusive economic zone and continental shelf are a property of the state. The provinces with the largest diamond exploration in Angola are Lunda Sul and Lunda North at the east. You will find ornamental stones, in particular marble, in Huila and Namib, these southern provinces, and gold in Huila, Cabinda on the north, Bengo, Zai, Ruambo, and Cunel. Angola is focused on improving its investment climate with various reforms and initiatives aimed at positioning the country as an attractive destination for foreign direct investment. Key measures on that sense include the National Development Plan 2023 up to 2027, which emphasizes economic diversification, infrastructure modernization, and human capital development. And we have also several other reforms that are being implemented. The new Angolan 2021 private investment law introduced significant reforms to attract foreign investment, including the ability to negotiate tax incentives directly with the state, and the removal of minimum investment threshold that existed before. The law eliminated the requirement for foreign investors to have Angolan partners, and allowing investors to have fully control on their capital structure. The government has established a credit line in partnership with Dutch Bank and the Development Bank of Angola, BDA, offering for financing up to 10 million euros per company for the projects that have a significant impact in export. In Angola, deposits can be talking about the gold sector and the prospection and production. The deposit can be classified as primary, and if they come from the rocks matrix, and secondary if they are dispersed in river beds, river channels, gravel, and sand. The body responsible for granting in Angola the prospecting license is the National Agency for Mineral Resources, and it is under the supervision of the Ministry of Mineral Resources, Oil and Gas. And we have the different aspects of the equipments that are being used for the extraction, and also the mechanism for obtaining the licenses. All these aspects are surely explained on the study that was carried out. Regarding the informal and the illegal mining and the law that regulate all these aspects, informal mining in Angola is called garimpo, is characterized on one end by law as illegal. However, authorized artisans operate autonomously or in small group in the northern, central, eastern, and southern region of the country must have a paper, an authorization from the government. The Angolan Penal Code determines that exploration and illicit trafficking of minerals are criminal practices and they are punishable by law. However, the mining code established that individuals or collectivity can work on the mining sector as long as it was said, they have the legal authorization. In terms of gold trades in Angola, currently, as we said, the body responsible for the trade of mineral is still the ministry and the national agency, because we are on the early stage of prospection of gold in Angola. The investor in the gold sector has to have a registration with the ministry, and the buyer of gold must pay 40% of value accrued tax before having the expo of gold. The country will soon have the first raw gold refinery through a public and private investment that is being built in the Viana Industrial Pole in Rwanda, and it is expected to be completed this year. And the processing capacity is 25 kilo of gold per day, refined gold per day. In terms of social responsibility, Angola is implementing strict sustainability and social responsibility standards in the mining sector, requiring companies to operate ethically and minimize environmental impact. These present opportunity to investors who want to adopt sustainable practices and align with international standards on environment and social governance. There are some environmental protection standards that are enshrined in Angolan law, namely those relating to the production of, to the protection of landscapes and species of flora and fauna, the preservation of ecological balance, and the right of citizens to a healthy and unpolluted environment. In terms of energy and water resources, Angola electricity production capacity has significantly increased, growing from 2.3 megawatts in 2015 up to 9.9 megawatts that are expected in 2025. The country has abundant rivers, such as the Kwanza in the Congo, which support hydropower potential.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fanconi, please excuse me. Just to remind you that we have other presentation, so we ask you courteously to shorten and try to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, in terms of transportation, we have the modernization of highway, railways, port, etc. And the Lobito corridor is one of the elements that is in state, actually. And we have telecommunications, different Angolan and foreign companies working in Angola. In terms of perspectives and opportunities for the Italian companies, the national plan of Angola prioritize key destination for international mining investment, with focus on enhancing the production of precious metal like gold, ornamental stone, ferrous metal, and copper, as well as mineral resources that can contribute to other sectors like agriculture. In this case, you are talking, for instance, about phosphates for fertilizers. Going quickly, Angola is improving in both governance, accountability, and we are also keeping pace with artificial intelligence, third-party models. We have a strong investment environment, a strong regulatory framework, and promising mineral exploration, especially in critical minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, and Angola is well positioned for foreign investment. So Angola has some challenges, and you can see the inflation, some difficulty with capital repatriation, infrastructure. We still have some illegal mining. And in the study, we highlighted recommendations for the companies that are willing to invest in Angola. As a conclusion, we can say that Angola offers great potential in gold sector. The challenges associated with poor infrastructure, limited tax incentives, and the regulatory issues need to be taken into account. However, investors who are willing to face these challenges, the Angolan gold sector presents significant opportunities, especially if combined with careful risk mitigation planning and investment of its own infrastructure. The country's economic diversification and government incentives can result in interesting returns in the medium and long term. And that's all for now. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Franconi, and thank you, Andrea, of course. Now, please, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Luigi Puc, our colleague, director, our office in Accra. Thank you, Luigi, and please, you can expose.
Ok, buonasera Giuseppe, un saluto a tutti i colleghi, buonasera a tutte le aziende collegate. Non voglio rubare molto tempo alla ricerca, diciamo, all'esposizione della ricerca in sé. Ecco, noi abbiamo cercato da ICE Accra di diciamo, coordinare questa ricerca basandoci sulle esigenze dei potenziali stakeholder e quindi renderla più funzionale possibile all'industria manifatturiera italiana. Quindi c'è una parte che analizza diciamo, la domanda e i gusti del consumatore e abbiamo cercato anche di trattare l'argomento dal punto di vista dell'import strategico e quindi delle fonti di approvvigionamento. E c'è anche un appendice diciamo, che non riguarda il trading in senso stretto, ma il settore minerario. Come sapete, insomma, il Ghana è uno dei principali produttori ed esportatori di oro dell'Africa, si contende diciamo, il primato con il Sudafrica e quindi era importante anche fare dei cenni proprio al settore minerario che in sé offre anche delle opportunità diciamo, per l'industria italiana, il settore dell'estrattivo, della raffinazione, delle componenti chimiche, eccetera. E allora io sì, darei a questo punto subito la parola al nostro ricercatore, Mr. Eric, are you online? Eric?
Yes, I'm here.
Ok, continuo brevemente, un cenno sul Ghana è una repubblica, una democrazia ormai matura, siamo alle porte di nuove elezioni, c'è un framework di regole e leggi che insomma regolamentano il settore, ovviamente tutto è da relativizzare e quindi anche qui presente una parte diciamo di settore informale. Anzi, per il resto mi associo alle raccomandazioni dei miei colleghi, insomma sono mercati che non si possono, che si consigliano affrontare autonomamente, fidatevi e affidatevi pienamente insomma alle istituzioni preposte ad assistervi. Ok, give you the floor, Eric.
All right, thank you.
Ok.
Let me go into the presentation mode.
Grazie a tutti.
All right. Okay, I believe you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so we start off our presentation anyway. My name is Eric Amesmeko and I represent Drive 5 Ghana Limited. We conducted this research in 4 West African countries, i.e. Ivory Coast, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So what we did was to essentially take an economic look, a general economic look at the 4 countries under our scope to sort of give a perspective as to the economic environment any investor will be coming into once he or she agrees to jump into the fray. Across the West African region, Nigeria leads with the biggest economy, followed by Ghana, and then Ivory Coast in that order. Now, Ghana actually for 2023 had a GDP of around 76 billion euros, and then Ivory Coast also followed closely. Burkina Faso has not been doing too badly itself, but Niger is way down there. Over the last couple of years, Ghana, the second biggest economy in West Africa, actually went through some turbulent times. And so the country has been struggling economically. But of course, it's picked it back after agreeing on a debt default agreement with its borrowing partners and international development agencies. Ivory Coast economy has been stable over the last couple of years after it went through its turbulent years in terms of war and what have you. And so the country is doing very well. I mean, there are some estimates that Ivory Coast has actually overtaken Ghana when it comes to the economy. But of course, that is yet to be proven by official records. So year on year, its inflation has been around 4% or 5% thereabout. Ghana currently, our inflation is around 20% thereabout. Burkina Faso also comes in. Niger in a distant last thereabout. When we look at the population across the region, we are looking at a total population of around 450 million people, with Nigeria contributing a lion's share. But of course, Ghana has a population of around 35 million, followed by Ivory Coast, which is around 30 million. And so there's a sizable market for within the region that is always looking for investment and opportunities. So we dive into the gold mining industry in the region, I mean, generally, but of course, our focus is on Ghana, Ivory Coast, Niger, and Burkina Faso. As most of you may be aware, Ghana is one of the largest producers of gold in the world, actually. And by estimates, 2029 actually overtook South Africa as the largest producer of gold in the world, producing around 142 metric tons of gold for that year. And its gold has been a very important resource for the country, earning a lot of foreign exchange into the country. And over the years, Ivory Coast has also been picking up, but of course, Burkina Faso is always ahead in terms of, because the Ivory Coast essentially began to liberalize its mining industry just about a decade or two ago, while Burkina Faso has been doing about 53 metric tons. It's plateaued a bit over the last couple of years, but then they've been doing not quite bad. What has been a challenge for the country has been its political instability and jihadist activities, which is also affecting the mining industry as a whole. When we come to the investment opportunities in the region, especially in the mining area, we can look at exploration activities. The four countries actually contribute quite substantially in terms of the mining industry in the West Africa. Ghana, for instance, within the last 8 years has issued over 1,600 mining licenses, which shows its readiness to liberalize its environment for more mining operations to come in. So there's a huge opportunity in the mining, especially the gold mining industry across the region. Burkina Faso is always yearning for more investment into the sector, of course, but political instability is also affecting it. Niger, which is also a mining country, but its focus mainly is on uranium. And so uranium has been the mainstay of the economy for some years now. Gold has been coming up a bit, but of course, when you look at 2022 figures, it's just doing about 2,000 kilos a year. So it's way down there. But of course, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, I mean, it's always at the top there. The opportunities inherent in this mining industry are quite a lot. We can look at refinery opportunities. There are Burkina Faso especially and Ivory Coast are looking to set up a whole lot of refinery opportunities for its mining industry. Ghana has quite a number of refineries because it's always been in the industry. Ghana has been mining gold for over a century now. And so the mining industry is quite developed in the country. The up and coming ones, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Niger, refinery is quite a non-existent industry in there. Most of these refineries are done by small scale smelters, as we call them, very rudimentary techniques. So there isn't much when it comes to refinery in Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, and Niger. But of course, Ghana is ahead when it comes to the refinery industry. Gold trading, that is the buying and selling of gold, is a very bustling industry in Ghana, where Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast. We can also talk of financial services. That is any investor willing to set up shop here and then offer financial facilities to miners is also a good area one can think of. And of course, technology and equipment, because it's a mining industry, miners and companies are always investing in new technologies and equipment to improve their productivity and output. So these are some of the areas we can look at when it comes to investment opportunities in the mining area or in the mining sector across the 4 countries we are looking at. Now let's jump into the jewelry industry in the region. Apart from Ghana and Ivory Coast, once again, Niger, Burkina Faso hasn't got that kind of a really robust and developed jewelry industry. I mean, most of the jewelry, when you take Niger, for instance, jewelry is almost the reserve of the Tuareg ethnic group, and they use sort of traditional techniques. You don't really have well-established entities or companies that are into full-time jewelry manufacturing. But of course, you can have a family, you can have some groups that set up to do rudimentary work without the use of, modern technology. When you come to Ghana, for instance, there are jewelry manufacturers in some of the mining areas. And then, of course, when you Accra, Kumasi, there's another city called Takoradi. They have jewelry manufacturers in these cities. Ivory Coast also is quite heavy on jewelry in its capital city, Abidjan. And the second, the commercial city, which is Yamoussoukro, there are a number of jewelry manufacturers in there. But when you take Burkina Faso, Niger, the industry isn't really that developed. So it's still the old traditional way of handmade jewelries, using whatever tools they can to do jewelries. So there are opportunities in the manufacturing area for any entity or company willing to jump in. I mean, in the area of polishing, in the area of cutting and all this design with modern technology, there are opportunities in there. Of course, when we look at all these industries, there are challenges that companies and entities also face. So once you are in or you're ready to jump in, you must also be looking at some of the challenges that you face. Competition, especially in the jewelry industry, is mostly coming from the low-cost products from countries like China, India, and what have you. And so these are some of the challenges one will look at, or any investor should also look out for when it comes to the manufacturing industry. There's also sort of an unskilled or sort of underdeveloped labor, which means that there are people willing to work, but then they don't have the skills to essentially contribute to what they want to do. So if you want to, or you're ready to jump into the manufacturing sector, then you must also be ready to train with modern tools and technology so that these people can contribute to your business. Now, let's throw some special focus on the countries. We take Ghana, for instance, and look at the opportunities as I mentioned earlier. The manufacturing sector, in terms of the jewelry industry, is yearning for more investment, and then players in that sector. We are looking at the polishing. So basically, the whole jewelry manufacturing value chain is looking for investment. But there are traditional ones. There are companies, Ghanaian-owned companies are already into manufacturing with sort of some modern tools and technique. But I mean, the advanced ones that will come from the West or even the Asian tigers, we do not have that kind of technology here. So these areas will also be beneficial to whoever wants to look into these areas. When you come to the regulatory environment, taxes and all that. Now for Ghana, as a case study, once you want to come into the country, there's a lot of, or there are processes that you go through in terms of setting up. You would have to look at registering as an entity, a legally operating entity at the Registrar General Department, which is a government agency. And then you also have to look at registering at the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, which is a body mandated to register foreign investors or investment. Once you register with these bodies, there are also incentives for you. There is another body called the Ghana Free Zones Authority, which also registers businesses from foreign countries. So what happens is that once you register with these bodies, for free zones, for instance, there's a tax incentive for you. The tax rate is reduced by about half for a period of 10 years. But of course, your with the free zones companies or companies operating in the free zones enclave, you'd have to be ready to export majority of your products outside the country. So that's the only caveat there. But then it gives you enough time to also breed and then breather in terms of taxes and what have you. And so all these registration processes also kind of give you incentives to do business. We can also look at the still regulatory environment. Now, the Ministry of Lands and Mineral Resources is actually the body in charge of all minerals and what have you. So they are in charge of issuing licenses through other departments under it. So the other departments will assess you and then make recommendations to the ministry, with the minister will then sign and give you off your license to go and operate. There is the Ghana Minerals or the Ghana Chamber of Mines, which is a body that also sort of takes care of all mining companies. The body, an organization formed by the mining companies to advance their own interests. The Ghana Chamber of Mines, and then there's also the Ghana Minerals Commission. This body also works with the ministry. It's a department under the ministry that also sort of issues concessions and what have you. And then the PMMC, which is a Precious Minerals Marketing Company. This body is a government agency that is set up to essentially do assaying, valuing and all that. So if you want to come into the country to buy gold, to export gold and all that, you'd have to go through a registration process with the PMMC. It's this body that will issue the license and the permit to export and then to even refine gold. So if you want to export, after going through all the processes, the PMMC has to also value whatever gold you are picking out, and then it will then grant you the permit to go ahead and then do your export. It's not really a cumbersome process, but if you decide to also go behind the law to do your own thing, then that's when you run into issues with some of these bodies. When it comes to the purchase and export processes, well, as I said earlier, Ghana has already issued about 1,600 permits since the beginning of 2017. So it means that the country is ready to liberalize its environment, business or mining environment, to welcome in more companies to operate. When gold is, point is that most of the gold that the country mines is mined by the big companies, the large scale companies, and these companies do export their own gold without selling it to any local buyers. But then if you want to really buy gold and excel, you have to deal with the small scale miners, what we call galamsey, or the artisanal miners, as it's called in Burkina Faso and other places. We call them galamsey. The galamseyers are those who give you, they sell their gold directly to you so that you can also do your processes and then go through the EMMC and then export your gold. The process, if you want, you are given a license, for instance, they start you with a prospective license, and this license will give you an access to the concession you want to go in and do your mining. The prospective license will then be scaled up or be moved to a different level once you are satisfied with the land and then the amount of deposit that you think you have in the land, and so you're okay, you want to go ahead and do your mining. Then the prospective license will now be replaced with the mining license, proper mining license, which will then grant you the permit to go into the concession and then begin your mining processes. Now, the laws here also says that government continues to maintain a 10% stake in all mining operations. So this is sort of a law that is already there. You can't change it. Government has a 10% stake in your business, whether you are a foreign, 100% foreign owned entity or not. You still have to give that or cede that 10% to government. In Burkina Faso, it has recently been increased to 15% because, as I said, of course, Burkina Faso is under military rule now, so laws get changed every now and then. They are trying to nationalize a number of businesses and even mining companies to sort of, as they say, bring in more resources for development. So that has been increased, even though across the West African sub-region, because of the economic community of West African state, that is ECOWAS, laws seem to be almost same across most of the countries. But because you have a military country or a military leadership in Burkina Faso, things get changed easily. We go to the supply chain. Of course, the supply chain for any jeweler or any buyer of gold, start from the small scale buyer, because as I said earlier, you don't get to deal with the large scale miners. They have their own export routes that they use, so you can't really go through them. You have to deal with the small scale miners who sometimes even sell to local buyers. So you can still work with local buyers. The best approach in entering into this kind of trade is to do partnership. You partner with local players who will then properly introduce you. But you must also be careful. There are fraudsters and scammers all over the place that if you're not careful, you also get scammed. So the best approach is, if you get into the country and want to do business, you can go through the Minerals Commission, which will then take you through, or even the GIPC, which is the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, for instance, or there are even Chamber of Commerce's here, where you can also route your searches and your inquiries through, and these will help you to get in touch with proper and fully registered entities without the scale of being duped. Ivory Coast has similar processes to Ghana, as I said, even though we are not a one homogeneous and kind of people, but laws and regulations in areas of mining and all these are almost similar. These countries mostly also understudy Ghana, because Ghana has been operating for over 100 years with this mining regime. And so they do understudy what Ghana presents and then adapt it to suit their own operations. So regulatory area, Ivory Coast has its own mining or ministry, which is also in charge of mining and what have you. The export regime in Ivory Coast is also similar to Ghana. And you'd have to also go through the Ministry of Mines, Petroleum and Energy in terms of registering your business and starting operations in the jewelry industry. We will jump to Burkina Faso for the sake of time. As I said, they also run a similar legal regime just as Ghana in terms of business registration and what have you. But of course, with Burkina Faso, Niger, and I think Mali, these countries have been taken over by military governments. And so their operations are in kind of rapid flux. They are changing every now and then. You can have laws that have been thrown away and then replaced with decrees. So if you want to jump into these countries, you must be extra cautious not to also get your fingers bent. They do have similar regimes, as I said. We basically have to just run through. Okay, so Burkina Faso, another key point here is that even this year, on 20th February, the Ministry of Energy and Mines decided to suspend the delivery of export license to gold, those who are buying gold. And so it means that if you want to get a license to export, you wouldn't be able to, because they want to route everything through the government. But then the government will then appoint or decide which bodies to give the licenses to do the export. Niger, as I said, its mining and jewelry industry is quite nascent. It's now in the development phase, very small in scale. And so even though they are also doing their best to sort of encourage people to invest in. But if you're not in the uranium sector or you're not interested in uranium mining, then of course the gold prospecting and mining will also be quite a difficult venture for you. They do have a quasi-state company, SML, which is a Lipato mining company, which does mining. And so other mining, that's almost the main mining company in the country. But then there are other small-scale miners, and then the areas of artisanal mining, which is also quite robust. But together, as I said, in 2022, the whole of Niger produced just about 2,000 kilos, which pales in significance compared to countries like Burkina Faso, which did about 53 metric tons, and Ghana, which did about 142 metric tons in 2019 alone. And their regulatory environment is also basically modeled on Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast, because they are also French-speaking countries, and they all take their inspiration from Ghana. The purchasing regime in Niger is a bit slightly different, because you have to also go through a number of, what do you call it? You have to go through a number of government agencies that will sort of register you, you pay your taxes and all that before finally being given the permit or the opportunity to do your export. And so Niger is quite slightly different compared to the other countries where once you obtain your license, you can easily do your export, even though it's not really a straightforward process. But Niger is quite a bit complicated. So that is where we draw our curtains on the mining and jewelry industries in the 4 countries in West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. Thank you, Luca. Grazie, Luigi. Allora a questo punto siamo praticamente oltre la durata che avevamo concordato e deciso per il webinar. Se ci sono eventuali domande possiamo farle ora, verifichiamo, oppure le potete fare direttamente agli uffici, come è stato già suggerito all'inizio, farle direttamente agli uffici della nostra che hanno partecipato, nostra rete estera in Africa, che hanno partecipato ad questo webinar. Non so se adesso potete formularle, nel frattempo vediamo che contenuto hanno. Ok, no. Allora, c'è qualche domanda, magari anche veloce, così che possiamo già rispondere? Oppure facciamo così, mandate per favore le domande direttamente alla rete estera dei nostri uffici e mettendo in conoscenza possibilmente noi di ICE Roma, della sede a gioielleria@ice.it. Va bene, quindi procediamo così. Allora, carissimi, io vi manderemo poi successivamente, nei prossimi giorni, appena avremo terminato alcune verifiche interne, e vi manderemo il materiale che è stato presentato durante questo webinar. Per cui se avete anche voi delle domande che avete da fare a noi qui della sede, siamo qui a vostra disposizione all'account gioielleria@ice.it.
Dottor Oliva, posso fare una domanda veloce?
Certo.
Sono Ottavia Sartini, Ferri Firenze, siamo un'azienda fiorentina e penso di avere le stesse domande che aveva prima provato a fare il collega di Pasquale Bruni. Semplicemente volevo ringraziare tutti coloro che sono intervenuti a supporto di noi aziende italiane. Le domande diciamo più importanti per noi sono tutte quelle che riguardano la logistica e come poter portare la gioielleria in questi paesi, oltre che la possibilità di incontrare eventuali partner commerciali di questi paesi, e se è possibile alla fine di questa call condividere con noi tutti gli indirizzi mail dei vari uffici. Prima è stato citato Johannesburg @ice.it, ma gli altri no. E se è possibile,
certamente li condivideremo subito.
grazie. Condividere, non so se è possibile condividere anche questa call.
E la registrazione intende? Certo,
Esatto.
quella verrà messa a disposizione.
Poi sicuramente noi come azienda comunicheremo con gli uffici esteri che sono intervenuti, perché abbiamo un po' di domande.
Va benissimo, ci fa anche piacere, tra l'altro. Siamo noi che ringraziamo voi aziende perché date un supporto veramente importante. In prima linea, poi io ci terrei anche soprattutto a ringraziare Federografi, perché la proposta è partita dall'associazione, questo vari anni fa, e che adesso è stata prodotta finalmente questo importante scouting, e che contiamo anche che avrà dei seguiti importanti, questo con l'apporto soprattutto di voi aziende. Quindi per cui adesso nella
Se
chat.
faccio intervenire, per gli indirizzi li trovate nella mail dove vi abbiamo mandato il link. Sono in copia a tutti gli uffici africani che sono stati coinvolti quando vi abbiamo mandato il programma aggiornato ieri pomeriggio. Trovate anche gli indirizzi lì nella mail.
Perfetto, grazie.
Grazie Gioia. Allora a questo punto direi che possiamo concludere qui. Già nei prossimi giorni vi trasmetteremo perlomeno i riferimenti di questa registrazione, e poi vi aggiorneremo anche a seguito di altri eventuali, come anche vi potremo trasmettere il materiale, e poi ci aggiorniamo per altri contenuti. Direi di concludere qui allora. Ringrazio ancora tutti, ringraziamo a nome dell'ICE tutti, e ci aggiorniamo prossimamente. Grazie ancora allora, e una buona serata a tutti. Grazie.
Grazie molte, grazie Gioia.